Hey all, here at OS Reviews, you're watching our retro review of Slacker Portable, the music player of the future that failed. This thing came out in 2008, and back then Apple iPods were still the talk of the town. That includes the iPod Classics, the Nanos, the Shuffles, and they came in various capacity models, but meant that you could only listen to music that you physically purchased. So back then, concepts like unlimited music streaming, subscription services were still very alien. Of course, in 2018, we have services like Spotify that millions and millions of customers have grown accustomed to. But a way for people to explore music was actually quite difficult back then. And that's why Slacker Portable, in my opinion, was so ahead of its time. It was a physical device that you could purchase, and every time you were connected to the internet, it would automatically refresh itself with new content. Slacker is an online system, so there is a catering to your specific preferences. There are DJs, so you can create your own stations. For instance, if I really enjoy listening to rock music, it would just refresh music similar to artists that I am, enjoying already. And the best thing was the Slacker Portable doesn't have a subscription fee, so you don't have to pay something like $10 a month to use it. What's also interesting is by refreshing, I mean that the new songs are temporarily saved on the player. So whenever I turn it off, I'm not connected to the internet, I can still listen to the songs that have been curated for me until the next time I'm connected to the internet again, it will refresh itself automatically. And since the Slacker Portable actually doesn't have a touchscreen display, you can imagine how typing in passwords for Wi-Fi routers could be quite slow and painful. But with a DeviceScape Connect, it meant that you could use a laptop computer to pre-sign into the Wi-Fi hotspots that you want to use and sync it with your Slacker. Now, unfortunately, the support for the Slacker Portables ended a few years back, but there are still ways to actually keep on using this device. By support ending, I don't mean that Slacker has gone out of business. In fact, they are still around. It's just you can download a mobile app now on your smartphone. However, it doesn't necessarily download those songs for you so that when you go offline, you actually can't listen to them, which is why the Slacker radio can still make a lot of sense for certain folks that are commuting and don't have internet connectivity in between. So anyways, by discontinued, I mean there's no way to sign in as a new user using the Slacker Portable to curate your own channels and stations. However, there are still forums online that tell you how to bring this player back to life, and it seems to be actually working in my quick testing so far. So if we talk a little bit about pricing, it was quite expensive for the time. It sold for $200, the entry-level model, which has 2 gigs of storage, and you have 15, again, stations which you can curate with the specific type of genres or artists that you enjoy. $250 will give you 4 gigs of storage, and $300 gives you 8 gigs of storage. So again, pretty expensive even back in the day. And that's because there weren't many MP3 players back then that had built-in Wi-Fi. In fact, that's really still the case today. If you think about it outside of the iPod Touch, a few years back, and the Zune HD, which had Wi-Fi, there really weren't many other players that had this feature. Sure, there are many players that have Bluetooth, but accessing the internet is much more rare, so they were able to make the pricing a bit more expensive. Also, this is an audio-only player, so even though it has a pretty large display for its time, measuring 4 inches diagonally, there's no way to use this to watch videos, and even though it connects to the internet, you can't use it as a web browser or access any social media. In the box, you actually get a Slacker case. It's made out of fabric, however, instead of leather like it tries to imitate. And you also get a pair of 3.5mm headphones, which are pretty crappy, so it's definitely recommended that you can get your own. It also charges and syncs using mini USB, so you can plug this into a computer if you want to manually sync it without using the built-in Wi-Fi. And we also have the battery, which is actually removable, as you can see here, and it's 1050 milliamp hours. It's actually created by Sony. As a size comparison, this really was quite a chunky and a large player for 2008. In 2018, this is by no means a large device anymore. We have phones with 6-inch screens which are much larger, but back then we had maybe the first generation iPhone had a 3.5-inch screen, so even smaller than the Slacker really next to it. Compared to other players from companies like Samsung, they just seemed minuscule by comparison. So this was actually kind of a futuristic design. Again, it's not a fully touch screen, but there is something called a touch bar on the side. Again, the iPod Touch was getting popular back then, so they wanted to implement some form of touch touch sensitivity, but it wasn't done very well. You could slide through this bar to go through various settings, kind of like a scroll wheel, and kind of tap once and tap twice to go back, but it wasn't very sensitive since it's a resistive bar as opposed to capacitive. Now, otherwise, the hardware of the Slacker Portable was made entirely out of plastic, so it wasn't quite as premium feeling as Apple's MP3 players at the same price. Now, this version is actually the 8GB model, so it was the highest end model that's one sold for $300, and you can actually find this now on Amazon or eBay for around $30. With the back cover snapped into place, you can see it has kind of a prism shape that's very interesting, but it's also flat, so it doesn't really wobble on the surface either. On the side, we have a scroll wheel, kind of like a BlackBerry, that's really used for main navigation, going through the menus, pressing down to select OK. There's also a home key, there's a skip track control, there's also a play pause, and a power key that also acts as a switch for you to kind of lock the player. So you can slide it down like this, and this will actually kind of lock any of the controls from being pressed in your pocket. On the top is where you'll find a volume rocker, which is kind of a strange placement, but it's okay. There's also a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, and on the other side we have two keys. There's a favorite button and a dislike or a skip key. So the reason why you need these controls is because, again, you are exploring new music, content you've never heard of before, most likely. So as you are listening to it, you can engage with the music, saying if you like it, you can tap on it, and this player is intelligent enough to know, okay, you like the song, the next song I'm going to play is going to be similar in genre or by artist. If you dislike it, it will try to avoid that type of content from repeating in the future. So as aforementioned, the Slacker services are actually free to use on the Slacker Portable, so you don't have to pay any subscription to use it. And the 8GB model comes with 24 channels, so you can, again, customize 24 different types of music or types of artists you enjoy listening to for 24 different curation types. The 4GB and 2GB models come with slightly less channels, so you can customize it a little bit less. So if you listen to a ton of music, that's where getting the highest memory capacity would be beneficial. The reason why they're able to make this free, however, is just like physical radio, there are some advertisements. Every once in a while, you'll hear a little bit of a commercial or an ad break that has also downloaded along with the songs. Or if you don't really like a song, you can skip the song, but you only have a limited number of skips. In fact, I believe it's only about 6 up to 3 hours. Slacker gives you the option of upgrading to a kind of a premium plan, so it's just like Spotify. In fact, it's exactly like Spotify. You can get rid of the ads and you can get unlimited skips if you upgrade. So pretty clever, and again, just very forward thinking in that business sense. A lot of elements, again, both the technology and the service, I just think really are ahead for only 2008. So I'm a little bit surprised that, Slacker Radio hasn't gained much traction in the years since, because I do think it's quite underrated in terms of being very much a pioneer of this type of internet streaming technology. All right, so let's take a closer look at the menu navigation next. So if we just go back into this home menu here, you can see this is what it looks like. Now, you saw a pop-up before that says, I haven't refreshed my stations in 77 days. Basically, you have to update or connect to the internet to refresh the music at least once a month. Otherwise, the music licenses will expire. So, afterwards, you just need to connect to the internet to refresh it. The refreshing process, if you are loading it with, all 24 custom channels, is going to take maybe an hour or two to complete. So it's a little bit slow, but keep in mind that it's essentially filling up the entire capacity. So 8GB worth of new content. So that's going to take a little bit of time. Anyways, if you have less channels, like only 1 or 2 channels that you're listening to that need to be refreshed, it goes a lot faster. So it just depends on, again, how much content you have loaded and set up for the device. So if we exit into this main menu here, what's interesting about the interface is it uses the display to show a lot of info like cover art, artist, album title, biographies, and it's pretty large and bright. The only downside is it's not an IPS screen. Those weren't popular back then, so the viewing angles are a little bit hit or miss, and it's not a laminated panel, so there's a gap between the plastic and the screen underneath, so it definitely glares under the sun. But otherwise, it still is a nice display to view back, artist biographies. It will explain, their career, their favorite hits, so you can actually learn more about the artist that you're listening to. Again, really meant for music discovery, which is again, a pretty exciting thing in my opinion. Now, there are a few limitations to this first generation Slacker Portable in that there are no EQ adjustments on board. This is a problem that the second generation Slacker Portable actually fixed that came out a year later. However, the Slacker Generation 2 actually has a much smaller display and it looks much more similar to a traditional player back in its day. So personally, I like the design of this first one a lot more because I think the touch sensitivity, the larger display, makes more sense as a artist and music finding tool. It's not quite as high res as some of those other players, and there's not quite as many adjustments and customizations that you can make, but all in all, it's functional. Otherwise, again, the scroll wheel allows you to control things pretty easily, and it's quite easy to maneuver, again, the UI just by clicking along and just going along. One final thing I really like about this player, a little ahead of its time, is all the keys and controls are backlit, so even in complete darkness. So if we turn the lamp here off, you can see all the favorites, the skip track, and even the volume keys here can be completely seen in pitch darkness, so that's awesome. So that's the Slacker Portable, again, the MP3 player or audio player of the future with a streaming service tie-in, Wi-Fi connectivity that came out in 2008 that unfortunately didn't fare too well. It wasn't a super big commercial success, and up against the iPod, sales were much smaller. But the fact that you can still kind of save and curate different stations directly on the player, and it can save those new tracks for up to 30 days after syncing with Wi-Fi is still a relatively unique feature to the Slacker Portable. And now for only, again, $30, it could still be worthwhile as something to just play around with, not to be taken super seriously, not to be, used for a great audio collection of the highest resolution, but for discovery of new artists, of new songs, it could still be kind of a fun little gadget to play around with. And so I thought I'd just kind of reminisce and bring this back to people's attention at this time. So you can check out more details in the links down below if you are interested. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Slacker Portable.